The DeLuca estate was designed to make people feel small. Every hallway stretched just a little too long. Every ceiling rose just a little too high. Marble floors reflected faces back at their owners, warped and diminished, as if the house itself were reminding everyone who truly belonged there. Elena Rossi moved through it like a shadow that had learned how to breathe. She pushed a cleaning cart along the east corridor, the wheels whispering instead of squeaking because she had fixed them herself on her first week. A loose wheel drew attention. Attention led to questions. Questions led to memory. Memory was dangerous. She wore the standard black uniform of the household staff. Plain, modest, anonymous. Her dark hair was tied back in a low knot. Her eyes stayed lowered, never lingering on the men who passed her carrying guns beneath tailored jackets. Most of them didn't see her. The ones who did forgot her immediately. That was the point. The estate was alive tonight, not with warmth, but with tension, like a held breath stretched too far. A summit was happening. One of those rare gatherings where enemies smiled at each other over crystal glasses and pretended the knives weren't already drawn. Elena smelled it before she heard it. Gun oil. Expensive cologne. Fear disguised as confidence. She paused at a corner and adjusted a framed painting that had been crooked for years. The act looked meaningless. It wasn't. From the reflection in the glass, she counted armed men. 8 visible. At least double that unseen. She moved on. In the grand dining hall, Vittorio De Luca stood at the center of gravity. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power wrapped around him like a tailored coat. Heavy, deliberate, inherited and reinforced by blood. His salt and pepper hair was combed back precisely. His suit was white tonight. A deliberate choice. It said untouchable. Men leaned in when he spoke. Elena approached with a silver tray of wine glasses. Her posture deferential, her steps measured. She stopped at his right side without being summoned, and poured. Her hand was steady, Vittorio noticed. He didn't look at her at first. He noticed patterns, absences, deviations from the expected. The maid's breathing was controlled. Her shoulders weren't rounded the way service workers' shoulders usually were. Her center of balance stayed aligned, trained. She moved a step away. That was when the collision happened. A junior waiter, new, nervous, overdressed, turned too quickly and struck her shoulder. The tray tilted. Red wine spilled. Not on the floor. Across Vittorio De Luca's jacket. The sound was small, liquid soaking into fabric, but the room reacted like a gunshot had gone off. Conversation died instantly. The waiter froze, eyes wide, already imagining his death. Elena stared at the stain for a fraction of a second too long. Then she spoke. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Soft. Controlled. Wrong. Vittorio looked at her now. Up close, her face was unremarkable in the way that dangerous things often were. Clear skin, straight nose, no makeup beyond what was required to look appropriate. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. "You stain my suit," Vittorio said calmly, "and you don't shake." Elena lowered her gaze. It was my fault. Her accent slipped, just slightly. Not local, not regional, not something that belonged to a maid who claimed to have grown up 2 streets away. Several men shifted uncomfortably. Vittorio's eyes narrowed, just enough to register interest. "Clean it," he said after a pause. "Then disappear. A dismissal, a humiliation, a reminder of hierarchy." Elena nodded once. She turned, retrieved a cloth, and knelt. From the floor, she could hear heartbeats, could hear lies forming in the air, could hear the faint electrical hum of surveillance equipment embedded in the walls. She cleaned the jacket perfectly. When she stood, Vittorio was already speaking again. The moment passed. Elena rolled her cart away, but something had changed. She felt it the way soldiers feel weather shift before a storm. In the service corridor behind the dining hall, Elena stopped and closed her eyes for half a second. She exhaled, slowly. This place was compromised. She hadn't planned to act tonight. She had planned to remain invisible. But plans were luxuries afforded only to those who controlled the board. and the board was about to be flipped. Far above the estate, a rifle scope settled into position. Inside, Elena resumed cleaning, her hands moving automatically while her mind recalculated every exit, every choke point, every door that could be locked or sealed. She passed the reinforced double doors at the north end of the hall and rested her fingers briefly on the metal edge. Solid, heavy, manual lock. Good. No one noticed. They never did. The first sign that something was wrong came not as sound, but as absence. The estate had a rhythm. Footsteps of guards pacing in loops. Murmured conversations carried through vents. The faint clink of glass from the dining hall. Elena had learned it the way sailors learn tides. Tonight, that rhythm faltered. One of the patrols missed a pass. She noticed it as she wiped down a sideboard in the auxiliary lounge, her reflection splitting across the polished wood. The guard assigned to the western stairwell should have crossed the doorway every 90 seconds. He didn't. 95 seconds. 100. Elena didn't look up. She finished the surface, aligned the decorative tray to its exact mark, and pushed her cart forward. Her pulse remained steady. She had lived through worse than silence. She moved toward the service elevator, listening. No raised voices, no alarms, the kind of quiet that preceded violence, not followed it. At the elevator panel, she pressed the call button and watched the numbers descend. As they did, her mind built a map, layers of the estate stacked like chessboards. Dining hall above. Storage and wine cellar below. The north corridor with its heavy doors. The east wing that dead-ended at a balcony overlooking the gardens. Sniper sightlines. She stepped inside the elevator just as it arrived and rode it down one level, exiting into the storage corridor. The air here was colder, thicker, with dust and cork. The lights flickered, one of them buzzing at a frequency that made her jaw tighten. That light hadn't buzzed yesterday. She crouched and adjusted a crate that had been shifted out of place. The scrape marks on the floor were fresh. Someone had moved through here recently, not staff. She stood, rolled her shoulders once, and reached into the pocket of her uniform. Her fingers closed around a thin metal strip, harmless looking, flexible, sharpened on one edge. It had once been a wine label cutter. She'd modified it months ago, just in case. The elevator doors opened behind her. Elena turned smoothly, already calculating distance and angles. It was only Marco, one of the junior guards. His jacket hung open. His tie was loose. Sweat shone on his forehead. "Hey," he said, voice too loud. "You're not supposed to be down here during events." She nodded, eyes lowered. "I was told to restock. Just finish up and get out." Big night. He didn't notice the tremor in his own fingers. He didn't notice the way Elena's gaze flicked to the dark corner behind him. He walked away. Elena waited until his footsteps faded before moving again. She took the stairs this time, ascending slowly, counting steps. At the landing, she paused and pressed her ear lightly against the wall. Voices. Low. Urgent. Not Italian. Not English. She recognized the cadence instantly, the clipped consonants, the efficient lack of emotion. Professionals. Her jaw tightened. She retreated silently and doubled back, taking a longer route toward the dining hall. As she approached, laughter spilled out. Forced, exaggerated, the kind meant to convince everyone, including themselves, that nothing was wrong. Elena re-entered through the service doors and resumed her place along the wall. Vittorio De Luca was speaking now, his voice smooth, commanding. He gestured with his glass, wine swirling dangerously close to the rim. "And loyalty," he said, "is the only currency that never devalues." Several men chuckled. Elena scanned the room. Two unfamiliar faces near the back, dressed like guests, but standing wrong. Weight on the balls of their feet, eyes tracking exits, not speakers. Her muscles coiled. She shifted positions slightly, placing herself closer to the north doors without appearing to do so deliberately. One of the unfamiliar men glanced her way. Their eyes met, just for a heartbeat. Recognition flared there, not of her identity, but of capability. He saw something in her posture that didn't belong. His hand twitched toward his jacket. Elena dropped her gaze instantly, shoulders rounding, spine softening. She became what he expected to see, The moment passed. Vittorio raised his glass for a toast. That was when the first shot shattered the chandelier. The explosion of glass and light came with a sound like the sky tearing open. Screams erupted as shards rained down, slicing into skin and silk. Elena didn't scream. She moved. The second shot took out a guard near the east wall. He went down hard, blood pooling fast. Panic bloomed. Men dove for cover. Chairs toppled. Tables overturned. Gunfire answered gunfire, echoing deafeningly in the enclosed space. Elena sprinted, not toward safety, but toward the doors. A waiter collided with her, sobbing. She grabbed him by the collar, yanked him behind a marble column, and shoved him down. "Stay," she said sharply. He obeyed without thinking. She reached the north doors as bullets sparked against metal frames. Her fingers flew over the locking mechanism. Heavy, manual, old-fashioned. She threw the bolt, then the second, then the third. Each one slammed home with finality. The gunfire outside intensified. Inside, the room trembled. Someone shouted. "They're trying to breach." Elena stepped back from the doors and turned. Vittorio De Luca stood near the center of the chaos, blood streaking his temple. His pistol was in his hand, but the slide was locked back. Empty. Their eyes met across the ruined room. He saw her fully now. Not the maid, not the stain on his jacket. Something else. "Open those doors," he shouted. Elena shook her head once. "They'll cut us down," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, carrying without effort. Several men stared at her, stunned. "You lock us in here with them?" Vittorio demanded. "With the ones outside," she corrected. The ones inside already made their move. As if summoned by her words, a man near the far table lunged for his gun. Elena moved before anyone else. Her arm snapped up. The metal strip flashed. The man screamed as his wrist collapsed, bones severed cleanly. She took his weapon as he fell and fired twice into his chest. Controlled. Precise. The room froze. Smoke hung thick. Blood slicked the floor. Elena lowered the gun and looked at Vittorio. "Now," she said quietly, "you listen to me." And for the first time in his life, Vittorio De Luca did. No one spoke. The gunfire outside battered the doors like a storm testing a hull, but inside the dining hall, the air had gone unnaturally still. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals. The chandelier lay shattered across the marble floor, crystals crunching under shifting feet. Elena stood with the rifle braced against her shoulder, muzzle angled toward the center of the room. Not threatening, but commanding space. Every man present understood one thing instinctively. She wasn't bluffing. "Everyone down," she said. Not shouted, not pleaded, stated. A few hesitated. Elena fired once. The round punched clean through a decorative pillar, sending stone dust into the air inches from a captain's face. "Down," she repeated. They obeyed. Bodies dropped behind overturned tables and heavy chairs. Those with weapons lowered them, uncertain, confused, but unwilling to test her resolve. Vittorio watched her with an intensity usually reserved for enemies and traitors. He had ruled through fear and loyalty, but this was something else. Competence so absolute it bent reality around it. "Count," Elena said, eyes never leaving the room. Vittorio blinked. "What?" "How many men you trust," she clarified, "not how many work for you." A pause. "5," he said finally. She nodded once. "Point them out." Slowly, carefully, Vittorio gestured. Elena tracked each man, cataloging posture, breathing, micro-expressions. One of them flinched when her gaze lingered. She shifted her aim. "You?" she said to the flinching man. "Slide your weapon across the floor." "I'm with." She fired again. The bullet passed so close it sliced skin. Blood bloomed across his cheek. The weapon clattered away. "Trust is a luxury," Elena said. "Right now, you earn survival." Outside, the gunfire changed tempo. She heard it immediately. "They're reloading," she said. "They'll try to breach in under 10 seconds." Vittorio's jaw clenched. Then we're dead. No, she replied. We're disciplined. She moved fast now, directing men into positions, using the architecture like a blueprint she'd memorized years ago. Heavy oak tables became barricades, wine crates stacked to form cover. She assigned angles of fire overlapping arcs. Strict fire discipline. No one shoots unless I say, she ordered. Ammo is finite. Lives are not. One man scoffed. Who the hell are you? Elena didn't look at him. Someone who noticed the shooters set their charges wrong, she said. If they breach now, they'll choke on their own smoke. The scoff died. The doors buckled under a concussive blast. Smoke poured in through the seams. Elena, Vittorio said quietly. That's your name, isn't it? She didn't respond. The doors gave way. The first shooter stumbled through, coughing, disoriented. Elena fired once. The second made it 2 steps before a crossfire dropped him. The third hesitated. Elena advanced. Her movements were economical, almost serene. She closed the distance and drove the butt of the rifle into his throat, crushing cartilage. He collapsed, gasping, eyes wide with disbelief. Silence returned. Bodies lay motionless. The room smelled of cordite and iron. Vittorio exhaled slowly. You could have taken over my house, he said. My men. My life. Elena finally turned to face him fully. Yes, she said. A beat. Why didn't you? She studied him. Not as a boss, not as a king, but as a variable. Because power built on ego collapses, she replied. Power built on function adapts. A shout echoed from the east corridor. More gunfire, more chaos. Elena's eyes sharpened. This isn't over, she said. They expected you to run. Then they don't know me. They know you well enough, Elena replied. They don't know me at all. She turned back to the room. We move, she ordered. Now. The service corridor swallowed them whole. The moment Elena pushed open the hidden panel behind the wine racks, the sounds of the dining hall, gunfire, shouting, the chaos of men clinging to old hierarchies, fell away. The air here was damp and cold, heavy with the smell of earth and aging stone. The passage hadn't been used in years. That was why it mattered. Vittorio stepped inside last. The panel slid shut behind him, with a dull thud that felt final. Single file, Elena said. Weapons down unless I say otherwise. No talking. No one argued. That alone told Vittorio how deep the shift had gone. The tunnel sloped downward, uneven steps carved by hands long dead. Emergency lights flickered to life as Elena brushed past a control box and flipped a switch without breaking stride. You know this place better than my architects, Vittorio muttered. I read what people forget, Elena replied. She moved at a steady pace, not rushed, not slow. Rushing made mistakes. Slow invited pursuit. Her breathing never changed, even as the tunnel narrowed and the ceiling dropped low enough that men twice her size had to hunch. Behind them, something exploded. Dust rained from the ceiling. They're collapsing the upper levels, one of the guards whispered. Yes, Elena said, to flush us down. She stopped abruptly, raising a fist. Everyone froze. She knelt, pressed her palm to the stone floor, closed her eyes. Vittorio watched her, unsettled. He had seen men listen to radio chatter, to informants, to instincts sharpened by paranoia. This was different. She was listening to the building itself. 2 paths, she said after a moment. Left leads to the garden drainage. Obvious. Right leads to the old water cistern. Which one do they expect? Vittorio asked. The one that makes sense. She turned right. The tunnel grew colder. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Their footsteps echoed despite efforts to stay quiet. Elena adjusted her pace, forcing the men to match it. Halfway through, she stopped again. Someone's missing, she said. Vittorio counted quickly. One of the 5 he'd named as trusted was gone. Gianni, he said. His voice tightened. He was behind me. Elena's jaw set. Then he never entered the tunnel, she said. Or he did, and doubled back. A shot echoed behind them. Not random, deliberate. He's guiding them, Vittorio said, the realization souring his mouth. Yes, Elena replied. And he's late. Give me your radio. The guard hesitated. Vittorio snapped. Now. Elena adjusted the frequency, listening for the faint hiss of encrypted chatter. She caught fragments, coordinates, directions, impatience. Gianni's voice cut through. They're heading for the cistern. Move. They think they're hunting us, she said. Good. She changed direction abruptly, forcing the group through a narrow maintenance shaft, barely wide enough for one person. Men cursed under their breath, scraping shoulders and weapons. Vittorio grabbed her arm as they moved. You're walking us into a dead end. No, she said. I'm walking us into a decision. The shaft opened into a circular chamber. Stone walls, waist-deep water at the center, ancient iron grates lining the far side. The cistern. Gianni stood there with two armed men, guns raised. His eyes widened when he saw Elena at the front. You? He spat. You're just... Gianni dropped before he finished the sentence. The other two raised their weapons. Vittorio's men hesitated. Elena didn't. She moved through the chamber like a blade drawn cleanly from its sheath. Short bursts, controlled movement, angles calculated to deny return fire. One attacker fell into the water, staining it dark. The other fled toward the exit. Elena let him run. He'll lead them here, Vittorio said. Exactly, she replied. And they'll die for it. She turned to Vittorio fully now, water lapping at her boots. You have two choices, she said. You keep being the man they expect you to be, or you survive. Vittorio stared at Gianni's body floating in the cistern, one of his oldest allies, reduced to dead weight. I underestimated you, he said. Elena met his gaze without flinching. Yes, not forgiveness, not accusation. Fact. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel beyond the chamber. Elena raised her weapon again. This is where we stop running, she said. And for the first time since the first shot was fired, Vittorio De Luca smiled. The footsteps came fast, too fast. Elena counted them by sound alone. Boots slapping stone, water splashing carelessly. Not disciplined. Not cautious. They thought the hunt was over. She moved immediately. Lights out, she said. One of Vittorio's men hesitated, then killed the emergency lamps. Darkness swallowed the chamber, broken only by thin slits of moonlight bleeding through the iron grates above. Elena stepped backward into the water. Cold bit through her boots, but she welcomed it. Cold sharpened focus. Cold kept panic away. She raised her hand. 3 fingers. 2. 1. The attackers burst into the chamber, weapons up, flashlights snapping on. And Elena was already gone. She surfaced behind the first man, wrapped an arm around his neck, and dragged him under. His scream became bubbles. She let him thrash just long enough to exhaust himself, then snapped his neck cleanly and released the body. A second man fired wildly into the darkness. Elena fired once. The bullet struck the flashlight, plunging half the chamber back into black. Vittorio's men opened fire only when Elena signaled. Short, controlled bursts that echoed brutally through the stone. The attackers had no cover, no angles, no time. Within seconds it was over. Water rippled around floating bodies. Silence returned, heavier than before. Elena stood still, listening. Nothing. She waded back to solid ground and nodded once. Clear. Vittorio exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. One of his captains stared at her, voice shaking. Who are you? Instead, she turned to Vittorio. They'll send more, she said. This wasn't a hit. It was a test. A test for what? He asked. For weakness, she replied, and they found it. Vittorio bristled, but didn't deny it. They know your routines, Elena continued. Your tunnels, your guest list, your internal loyalties. She met his eyes. Your empire is leaking. Vittorio looked around at the dead men. Friends, enemies, traitors all bleeding into the same water. How deep? He asked quietly. Elena's expression hardened. Deep enough that if I leave you tonight, she said, you'll be dead within 48 hours. The words weren't a threat, they were an assessment. And if you stay? Vittorio asked. She paused. That depends, she said, on whether you're willing to stop being the most important person in the room. The idea landed like a blow. Vittorio De Luca had built his life on being exactly that. He studied her carefully now, no longer as a curiosity, but as a force. The way she stood, unbothered by blood or cold or death. The way the men looked at her instead of him, without even realizing it. You're not asking for protection, he said. No, Elena replied. I'm offering survival. A long silence followed. Then Vittorio did something no one in the room had ever seen him do. He nodded. Then stay, he said, and tell me what I don't want to hear. Elena didn't smile. Good, she said, because you're not ready for the rest. She turned toward a secondary exit, one not marked on any blueprint Vittorio remembered. This way, she ordered, and without hesitation. The men followed her, not because of loyalty. Good, she said, because you're not ready for the rest. She turned toward a secondary exit, one not marked on any blueprint Vittorio remembered. This way, she ordered, and without hesitation. The men followed her, not because of loyalty, because of competence. Because in the dark, in the blood, in the ruins of certainty, Elena Rossi had become the axis around which survival turned. They reached the safe house just before dawn. It was an old structure, buried beneath a derelict textile warehouse near the river, invisible to anyone who didn't already know where to look. Vittorio had inherited it decades ago, but like most of his contingency assets, it had become a relic, untouched, untested, trusted out of habit rather than verification. Elena verified it anyway. She swept every room before allowing anyone inside, checked vents, drains, electrical panels. She dismantled a hidden camera no one remembered installing, and disabled a panic beacon embedded in a wall behind a false fuse box. This place would have killed you, she said flatly. Vittorio watched, arms folded. It never has. Luck isn't loyalty, Elena replied. Inside, the men slumped into chairs or leaned against walls, exhaustion finally claiming them. One was bleeding from the shoulder. Another had a fractured hand. No one spoke unless spoken to. Elena took inventory. Weapons, ammunition, communications, food, water. She assigned 2 men to medical care, directing them with clipped efficiency. She tore fabric for bandages, disinfected wounds with what little alcohol she found, stitched a gash herself when the medic hesitated. Her hands never shook. When it was done, she turned to Vittorio. Now, she said, we talk. They sat across from each other at a scarred wooden table. A single lamp cast harsh light between them, leaving the corners of the room in shadow. You're not from here, Vittorio said. No. You didn't come looking for me. No. You stayed. Yes. Vittorio leaned back slightly. Why? Elena considered the question. Because you're standing at a fault line, she said. And whether you fall or adapt will decide how many people die next. That includes me, Vittorio said. Yes. He studied her face, searching for ambition, hunger, resentment. He found none. You could take advantage of this, he said. Sell what you know. Walk away rich. I've been rich, Elena replied. It didn't make me safer. Silence stretched. Finally, Vittorio asked, What are you? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her pocket and placed something on the table. A ring. Plain. Steel. Scarred. Vittorio recognized it instantly. Military. Not Italian. Special operations, Elena said. Joint task force. Cross-border. Black file. Alive. Vittorio asked. No. Retired? Disappeared. He absorbed that. They wiped your record, he said. They buried it, she corrected. Along with my unit. Another silence. What do you want from me? Vittorio asked. Elena met his eyes. I want you to stop pretending this is personal, she said. It's structural. Someone is reorganizing power in this city. Quietly, efficiently. They're removing men like you because you're predictable. Vittorio bristled. And you're not? I am, she said, to people who understand systems. She leaned forward slightly. Right now, you're a symbol, she continued. Symbols die. Operators replace them. And you? He asked. What are you? An operator, she said. Footsteps approached from the corridor. One of the guards appeared, pale. We intercepted a transmission. Play it. Static crackled, then a voice filtered through. Calm, male, precise. Phase 1 incomplete. DeLuca survived. Asset compromised. Proceed to Phase 2. Elena shut the radio off. They're accelerating, she said. Vittorio clenched his jaw. Phase 2 of what? Elena looked at him. Isolation, she said. They'll turn your allies against you. Freeze accounts. Leak evidence. Frame you. She met his gaze steadily. And if that fails, she added, they'll come for the people you protect. The words landed hard. My family, Vittorio said. Yes. He stood abruptly pacing. I won't hide. I'm not asking you to, Elena said. I'm asking you to think. He stopped in front of her. You're telling me to trust you with everything. No, she replied. I'm telling you that whether you trust me or not, the war has already chosen you. Another long moment passed. Then Vittorio extended his hand. Equal, he said. Not an offer, a recognition. Elena looked at it, then shook it once. Firm. Final. Outside, the city began to wake, and somewhere in its arteries a new power structure began to form. Quietly, efficiently. Without ceremony, the first rule Elena imposed was silence. No retaliatory strikes, no public funerals, no declarations of strength meant to soothe egos. Vittorio's men were used to answering threats with spectacle. Elena stripped that instinct away in a single sentence. If they can see you react, she said, they can see you bleed. They operated from the safe house for 3 days. On the first day, Elena mapped Vittorio's organization the way an engineer studied a collapsing bridge. Not by loyalty, but by load-bearing points. Who moved money? Who controlled logistics? Who talked too much? Who stayed quiet even when they were scared? She didn't interrogate anyone. She observed. People revealed more when they thought they weren't being tested. She reassigned roles subtly. Men who liked attention were given busy work. Men who preferred silence were moved closer to information flows. One captain noticed his access shrinking and overcompensated by boasting. Another noticed his expanding and said nothing. By the second day, Elena knew exactly where the rot lived. By the third, she knew how to remove it without cutting flesh. She used ledgers instead of bullets. A shipment delayed here. A payment rerouted there. A rumor allowed to grow in one corner quietly disproven in another. Men who had been preparing to defect suddenly found their escape routes dry up, their contacts unreachable, their accounts frozen by anonymous compliance audits. Vittorio watched it unfold with a mix of awe and unease. You're dismantling them without killing them, he said. Killing is loud, Elena replied, and it teaches the wrong lesson. What lesson is that? That power is emotional, she said. It isn't. It's logistical. She finally allowed herself to leave the safe house on the 4th night, disguised again, anonymous. A ghost walking the city, she now understood from the inside out. She visited places Vittorio never would, dockside cafes, freight offices, backroom accounting firms. She spoke 5 languages over the course of one evening, each accent precise enough to pass unnoticed. She listened more than she talked. By dawn, the city's underworld was uneasy. Something had changed. Deals fell through for no apparent reason. Meetings were postponed indefinitely. Messages went unanswered. Men who thought they were protected found themselves exposed, not violently, but completely, whispers began. Not of Vittorio, of someone else. A woman. No name. Just a presence. A pattern. Back at the safe house, Vittorio received a call from an old ally, one of the few who hadn't turned. You still alive? The man asked. Yes, Vittorio replied. A pause. Then, carefully. Good. Because someone else just declared you obsolete. Vittorio smiled faintly. They're late, he said, and hung up. That night, Elena stood by the window, watching the river carry light away from the city. They'll try to flush you out, she said without turning. They'll force a confrontation. I won't run, Vittorio replied. I know, she said. That's why they'll lose. He studied her silhouette. You've already won, haven't you? Elena considered. No, she said. But they don't know that yet. For the first time since he'd met her, Vittorio felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, relief. The assassination attempt was designed to be seen. That was how Elena knew it wasn't meant to succeed. The car bomb went off 2 blocks from Vittorio's primary office. Close enough to rattle windows, far enough to avoid him. The explosion chewed through a parked sedan and sent a fireball climbing into the night sky, a declaration more than an attack. The message was clear. We can reach you. Vittorio arrived at the scene within minutes, against Elena's advice. He stood behind the police cordon, coat draped over his shoulders, eyes fixed on the smoke curling into the dark. Cameras flashed. Witnesses whispered. His enemies wanted his face on every screen. Elena stayed across the street, hood pulled low, watching everything. They'd seeded the area well. Too well. She spotted at least 4 surveillance assets pretending to be onlookers. One with a phone angled just wrong, another with the stiff posture of someone wearing a concealed earpiece. They wanted escalation. They wanted Vittorio to respond with violence so they could justify open war. Elena stepped out from the shadows. She crossed the street calmly, unhurried, and took Vittorio by the elbow. Leave, she said quietly. His jaw tightened. Now is not. If you stay, you play their game. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. As they turned to leave, one of the watchers moved too fast. Elena felt it before she saw it, the shift in air, the tightening of intent. She pivoted, hand already moving, and slammed her palm into the man's chest, driving him backward into a parked car. His breath left him in a wet gasp. She twisted his wrist and disarmed him in the same motion, the pistol clattering to the pavement. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones swung toward them. Elena froze for a fraction of a second. This was the moment she'd been avoiding. Invisibility had kept her alive, but survival was no longer the goal. Control was. She straightened slowly and looked directly into the nearest camera. Not angry, not defiant, calm, competent. The man she'd disarmed slid to the ground, coughing, eyes wide with disbelief. Elena turned back to Vittorio. Now, she said. They left together. The footage spread within the hour. A woman, fast, precise, unafraid. The underworld didn't ask who she was. They asked what she was. That night, Elena didn't return to the safe house. She went somewhere else entirely. A place even Vittorio didn't know existed. The building was nondescript, concrete peeling paint, the kind of structure cities forgot on purpose. Inside, the lights were off. She unlocked the door without hesitation and stepped into the dark. A voice spoke from the shadows. You finally stopped hiding. I stopped waiting, she said. The figure emerged, an older woman, sharp-eyed, scarred, carrying herself like someone who had survived by never being surprised. You're early, the woman said. The city is accelerating, Elena replied. So am I. They sat across from each other at a metal table. You could walk away, the woman said. Let them tear each other apart. And inherit the chaos? Elena asked. No. The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. So you'll take the crown, she said. Elena didn't correct her, because crowns weren't always gold. Sometimes they were invisible, felt rather than seen, recognized only by those who mattered. When Elena returned to Vittorio, just before dawn, he was waiting. You were on every screen, he said. Yes. You exposed yourself. I positioned myself, she corrected. He watched her carefully. They're afraid of you now. They should be, Elena replied. But fear isn't enough. What is? He asked. She met his gaze. Structure, she said. Legitimacy. A future they can't disrupt without destroying themselves. Vittorio leaned back, exhaling slowly. You're not protecting my empire anymore, he said. No, Elena agreed. I'm replacing it. Silence stretched between them. Then Vittorio smiled. Slow, genuine, unguarded. Good, he said. It was time. Outside, the city buzzed with rumors and half-truths. Inside, a new order began to take shape. And this time, it had a face. The first move Elena made was not violent. That was what unsettled everyone. Vittorio expected a purge. His enemies expected retaliation. The city expected blood because blood had always been the language of transition. Instead, Elena closed accounts. She called meetings that never happened. She canceled shipments without explanation. She allowed rumors to grow unchecked, then fed them contradictory facts until no one could tell what was true anymore. She didn't remove men. She removed certainty. Within a week, crews stopped taking risks. Capos delayed decisions. Independent operators refused contracts because they couldn't verify who was actually in charge anymore. Chaos. Quiet. Paralyzing chaos. Vittorio watched the reports stack up on the table in his private office, each one describing the same phenomenon from a different angle. They're freezing, he said. Yes, Elena replied, standing at the window. Fear makes people reckless. Uncertainty makes them obedient. You're not just dismantling my enemies, he said slowly. You're redesigning the environment. Elena turned to face him. Power doesn't live in people. It lives in systems. People are interchangeable. Vittorio didn't like how easily she said it. But he couldn't argue. The first man to break was a mid-level broker named Salvatore. Not because he was weak, but because he was ambitious. Elena had rerouted one of his major income streams without blocking it entirely. Just enough to make him nervous. Just enough to make him talk. He showed up at a neutral cafe, shaking slightly, convinced he was being watched. He was right. Elena sat 2 tables away, hair tied back, dressed like an office worker on her lunch break. She didn't look at him when he spoke to the handler she'd sent. She didn't need to. Salvatore talked for 47 minutes. When he was done, Elena stood and walked past him without slowing. He looked up. Recognition hit him like vertigo. She smiled once, small, controlled. He never took another job in the city. Word spread quickly after that. If Elena knew your name, your future was already decided. Not because she would kill you, but because she would make you irrelevant. Vittorio felt the shift most acutely when his own men began coming to Elena instead of him. Not openly, not disrespectfully, but instinctively. Problems were brought to her. Conflicts deferred until she weighed in. Decisions paused until she nodded or shook her head. One night, he confronted her. You're becoming the center, he said. I already am, Elena replied. You just stopped pretending otherwise. You're changing the rules, he said. Yes. And where does that leave me? Vittorio asked. Elena considered him carefully. Alive, she said, respected, dangerous, but no longer essential. That depends on you. The honesty stung. Vittorio poured himself a drink and didn't offer her one. You're building something that doesn't need a face, he said. I'm building something that can survive one, she replied. The real test came 3 nights later. A coalition of smaller families, ones Vittorio had always treated as peripheral, called for a sit-down. Neutral ground, public, symbolic. They wanted to see who would show. Vittorio prepared to go alone. Elena stopped him at the door. You go, she said. But you don't speak. His brow furrowed. Then why am I there? Because symbols still matter, she replied. Just not the way you think. The sit-down took place in an old opera house, its velvet seats faded, its chandeliers dim. The families arrived in pairs, cautious, suspicious. Vittorio entered last. The murmurs began immediately. Then, Elena walked in behind him. No disguise, no pretense. She took a seat beside Vittorio and folded her hands calmly in her lap. The room went still. One of the family heads finally spoke. Who is she? Elena did. I'm the reason none of you have moved against him, she said, and the reason you won't. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Another man scoffed. You expect us to believe? Elena slid a folder across the table. Inside were transaction records, communications, and contingency plans, each tailored to the person sitting there. You've all been preparing for war, she said evenly. I've already mapped the aftermath. Silence. You can fight, she continued. You'll lose money, men, time, and whatever legitimacy you think you have left. Or you can align. And under whose rule? Someone demanded. Elena leaned back slightly. Under a system, she said. One that doesn't collapse when someone gets emotional. Vittorio said nothing. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone in the room understood something fundamental. The era of personalities was ending, and Elena Rossi wasn't taking the throne. She was removing the need for one. No disguise. No pretense. She took a seat beside Vittorio and folded her hands calmly in her lap. The room went still. One of the family heads finally spoke. Who is she? Elena did. I'm the reason none of you have moved against him, she said, and the reason you won't. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Another man scoffed. You expect us to believe? Elena slid a folder across the table. Inside were transaction records, communications, and contingency plans, each tailored to the person sitting there. You've all been preparing for war, she said evenly. I've already mapped the aftermath. Silence. You can fight, she continued. You'll lose money, men, time, and whatever legitimacy you think you have left. Or you can align. And under whose rule? Someone demanded. Elena leaned back slightly. Under a system, she said. One that doesn't collapse when someone gets emotional. Vittorio said nothing. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone in the room understood something fundamental. The era of personalities was ending, and Elena Rossi wasn't taking the throne. She was removing the need for one. The backlash didn't come from the old families. Elena had expected that. Men who built their lives on inherited power feared disruption, but they understood leverage. They understood when the board had shifted beneath them. The threat came from somewhere else. From people who didn't need territory, didn't need reputation, didn't need permission. The first sign was a file. It arrived on a secure channel Elena hadn't used in years. One she'd burned after her unit was erased. The encryption was old but precise. Personal. She stared at the header for a long time before opening it. Inside were photographs, grainy, tactical, taken from angles only professionals used. Her unit, alive. Not all of them, but enough. Training exercises she'd never known were documented. Conversations she'd believed private. One image in particular made her chest tighten. Herself, younger, standing beside a man who died in her arms. A message followed. You don't get to rewrite the world without us. Elena closed the file. Vittorio noticed the change immediately. She grew quieter, more inward, not hesitant, never that, but sharper as if anticipating a blow she hadn't yet located. What did they send you? He asked that night. Proof, Elena said. That ghosts still have teeth. She didn't elaborate. 2 days later, the city erupted, not with violence, but with information. Anonymous leaks hit every channel at once. Financial crimes tied to Vittorio. Real ones, exaggerated ones, fabricated ones. Enough truth mixed with lies to make the whole thing combustible. Then came Elena. Her face, her past, her military record redacted, but recognizable. Her presence at multiple conflict zones. Her name attached to operations that had never officially existed. The narrative was clean. She wasn't a stabilizer. She was a weapon. Public pressure mounted. Allies panicked. Neutral parties froze cooperation. Politicians distanced themselves. Vittorio slammed his hand on the table when the last report came in. They're turning you into the villain, he said. They're making you the threat. Elena nodded. That was always the risk. You should disappear, he said. Now, let me take the heat. She met his gaze. This ends with me, she said. If I run, they win. You don't owe this city anything, Vittorio snapped. I owe myself, Elena replied. That night, the final move came. An invitation, a single location. No intermediaries, no negotiation. They wanted her. Alone. Vittorio argued, threatened, ordered. Elena ignored him. They won't kill me, she said as she prepared. They need me discredited first. Broken. Publicly. And if you're wrong? Elena paused at the door. Then I was never meant to survive power, she said. The meeting place was an abandoned rail terminal on the edge of the industrial district. Floodlights snapped on as she entered, bathing the concrete in harsh white. Figures emerged from the shadows. 5 of them. Older, hardened, familiar in the way nightmares were familiar. One stepped forward. You should have stayed invisible, he said. Elena's voice was steady. You should have let the past die. You don't get to choose what you become. Elena looked at them, at the men who had trained her, used her, erased her. No, she said. You built a weapon. I became something else. They smiled and drew their guns. The guns came up together. Clean, professional, no wasted motion. Elena had already moved. She didn't run forward or back. She stepped off the line, half a pace to the left, just enough to break symmetry. The first shots cracked the concrete where she'd been standing a heartbeat earlier. She rolled, came up behind a rusted signal console, and fired twice without aiming. One man dropped. Not dead. Disabled. Pelvis shattered. Screaming. The others adjusted instantly, spreading out, cutting angles. These weren't street killers. They didn't chase. They hunted. Elena breathed in through her nose. Counted. Wind direction from the open terminal doors. Echo patterns. Light glare from the flood lamps creating blind zones. She used the light. She shot one lamp. Darkness swallowed half the platform. Another lamp died. Then another. Now the shadows belonged to her. Still thinking tactically. One of them called out, "Good girl!" The voice was familiar. Elena flinched despite herself and punished the mistake by firing immediately. The round grazed the man's shoulder. He cursed, retreated. She repositioned, low and fast, using pillars as cover. A round clipped her arm. Pain ballooned hot and immediate. She ignored it. Pain was data, not command. She let them. When the first man rounded the corner, she caught his wrist, twisted, and drove a blade under his ribs. He collapsed without a sound. She took his weapon mid-fall and fired through the concrete. Tracking sound. Another body hit the ground. Now it was 3. They slowed. They remembered who she was. You think this changes anything? The leader shouted. You kill us, you're still exposed, still hunted. Elena stepped out into the open. She let them see her. Blood streaked down her sleeve. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were calm. I know, she said. That's why this ends with me. They fired. She didn't dodge. She advanced. Every step was calculated. Between shots, between reloads, through hesitation. She closed the distance and turned the fight into something intimate and unforgiving. One man went down choking. Another lost his weapon and tried to run. She didn't shoot him. She let him go. The leader stood alone now, gun shaking just enough to betray him. You were ours, he said. You don't get to rewrite that. Elena raised her weapon. No, she said softly. You don't. She fired once. When it was over, the terminal was quiet again, except for the wind and the distant sound of the city that would never know how close it had come to being shaped by ghosts. Elena stood among the bodies for a long moment. Then she dropped her weapon, walked away. Vittorio was waiting when she returned. He saw the blood, the injury, the finality in her eyes. It's done, she said. He nodded slowly. Then so is everything else. Within hours, the leak stopped. Accounts unlocked. Pressure eased. The narrative shifted, not because the truth won, but because the source was gone. The underworld adapted, as it always did, but it adapted around her. The city never announced the change. There were no headlines declaring the end of one order and the birth of another. No dramatic arrests. No open war. The streets looked the same to anyone passing through. Same traffic, same neon reflections and wet pavement. Same deals whispered in corners. But beneath it, the structure had shifted. Vittorio De Luca still existed. That alone was a signal. He kept his offices, his name remained on properties, his presence still commanded respect in rooms where power mattered. But the sharp edges were gone. The volatility, the unpredictability that once defined his rule, had been replaced by something colder, deliberate. Men no longer asked what Vittorio wanted. They asked what would work. Elena Rossi never took an official title. She didn't sit at the head of tables or pose for photographs. She didn't collect tribute or demand loyalty. In fact, many who benefited from the new order never met her at all. They didn't need to. The system carried her fingerprint everywhere. Routes stabilized. Conflicts resolved before they ignited. Violence became rare. Not because mercy had triumphed, but because inefficiency had been eliminated. Those who tested the structure didn't disappear dramatically. They simply found themselves without leverage, without allies. Vittorio understood his place in it clearly. One evening, months later, he poured 2 glasses of wine in his office and set one across from Elena. She accepted it, but didn't drink. "You won," he said. Elena looked out the window. "No," she replied. "I finished." He smiled faintly. "Is there a difference?" "Yes," she said. "Winning invites challengers. Finishing removes the need for them." He raised his glass. To the quiet ones, Elena inclined her head once. Later that night, she walked alone along the river where the city's lights fractured across dark water. She thought of the maid she had pretended to be, the uniform, the lowered eyes, the invisibility that had once been armor. She had used it well. She would never need it again. Power had revealed itself, not as dominance, but as design, not as fear, but as inevitability. Elena didn't rule because people bowed. She ruled because the world functioned better when she was involved. That was the highest form of authority. Never underestimate the quiet one, not because they are secretly dangerous, but because they are often the only ones watching clearly when everyone else is performing power, instead of understanding it. True dominance doesn't announce itself. It organizes. It endures. It survives ego. If you stayed to the end, like the video, it tells the algorithm this kind of storytelling matters. Subscribe for more dark cinematic stories of hidden power and transformation. And comment below, who did you underestimate before they changed everything? Because the ones who clean the room often decide who owns it next.